I'm sharing this story about dealing with an entitled employee who thought he was untouchable. For over 20 years, I worked in middle management for our city government. I reported to a department head who answered to the mayor. My job involved managing a small team, usually between 5 and 10 people, mostly part-timers who rotated every few years. I helped beef up their resumes, paid for training, and gave them opportunities to grow professionally. My main job was securing federal grants for small infrastructure projects, adding accessible benches to nature trails, creating curb cuts on older sidewalks, or building bridges on walking paths across ditches. I wrote the grant proposals and specifications, then my staff helped administer the grants. Sometimes they did the work, other times they supervised contractors. These grants included a matching component. We'd contribute city cash, equipment time, staff hours, or coordinate with volunteer organizations who provided labor as our match. That's where my trouble with one employee began. When he first joined us, he seemed decent. Let's call him my entitled employee. He handled basic tasks well at first, but soon decided he was the greatest employee ever. His overconfidence led to mistakes. He would overextend himself and then need bailouts. While he handled simple tasks, he struggled with math, grammar, and talking professionally with adults. We were working on a bridge project, phase 3 of 3, and I put my entitled employee in charge. This was our third round of bridge replacements, 21 bridges total, done in batches of 7, so we had plenty of experience. The process was almost automatic. All my entitled employee had to do was show up with materials and let the volunteer workers do their thing while tracking their hours for our grant match. He barely did an adequate job. I had to keep him on track to stay within specifications. The grant was for improving water quality, but my entitled employee kept trying to redirect resources toward recreational improvements. We exchanged many emails and texts about this. Our department used project codes to track grant spending, with each grant having its own code. It was a simple system for tracking time and materials through accounting. Volunteers signed daily logs, keeping the process organized. That fall, my entitled employee kept struggling with basic tasks and eventually demanded a promotion for his outstanding work. The requirements for promotion were clear government standards, but his laziness prevented him from meeting them. His attitude got worse until he became intentionally negligent, putting himself and others in danger. After a serious incident, I called him into my office and gave him a choice: resign or be fired. Resigning would allow him to potentially be rehired in a different department, while being fired would blacklist him from city employment. He refused to resign and seemed shocked when I terminated him. I think he believed I was bluffing. He saw himself as indispensable when really he was just a problem. His father is a well-known local attorney. Looking at my entitled employee's criminal record, it was obvious that his daddy had been bailing him out his entire life. Assault charges dropped, driving under the influence reduced to a traffic violation, possession charges reduced to infractions. My entitled employee decided to come after me. First, he called the federal division that oversees my grants to report fraud. They launched an investigation, but my records were perfect. When they called him in for a meeting, his proof of fraud was that he felt the bridges should have been a lower priority, and the money would be better spent elsewhere, so the fraud was misuse of funds. What he failed to mention was that the grant specifications had been followed precisely by him. He had tried to divert funds, and I had stopped him. I had written evidence of everything. The project he accused of fraud was our showcase success story, included in a slideshow presentation to the state legislature showing the grant program's effectiveness. During the meeting with federal investigators, they asked my entitled employee about his fraud allegations. He admitted he was alleging fraud on a project he managed himself. They asked about this contradiction, and he tried to argue that the money should have been used differently. The federal investigator told him that federal grants must be used exactly as specified in the approved applications. When my entitled employee tried to argue more, the investigator pointed out that the documentation showed he was the one trying to violate grant terms and that I had prevented it. The investigator said, There was no evidence of fraud except what my entitled employee had tried to commit himself. The federal investigators and city officials were furious about the waste of time. With my perfect documentation, my entitled employee was forced out of the building. Next, he filed a wrongful termination lawsuit. He told his father about the supposed mistreatment, and Daddy filed the legal paperwork. I contacted the city attorney and sent hundreds of pages of organized documentation with a detailed summary. I was at City Hall when his father walked out of the legal department, apologizing for his idiot son. According to a mutual friend, Daddy told my entitled employee off and withdrew the financial support that had allowed him to survive on part-time work all these years. Around the same time, his wife discovered his affair. Then his mistress got pregnant. Things got rough for him. From what I hear, he's doing better these days, but he learned some hard lessons about entitlement and accountability. His father's protection had shielded him from these lessons for far too long. I saw chaos at a children's movie when I was 15. During the summer when Finding Dory came out, my mom thought it would be nice for us. Me, her, and my baby brother who was about a year old. My other brothers stayed home either with friends or gaming. We got to the theater early as my mom liked to do. This let us get seats and the top row was a clear view. We bought popcorn, drinks, and candy, then sat down. Other families came in after us. There were many children. They outnumbered adults and teenagers 2 to 1. Most parents barely watched their kids who were getting restless before the movie started. As the lights should have dimmed, a theater employee walked in. I couldn't see him through the people below, but I heard him say they would keep the lights on because of all the children, to avoid scaring them. He left, and what followed was my worst movie experience ever. For about 10 minutes, everything was fine. The children watched the start of Finding Dory. But that didn't last. Without darkness to signal quiet time, kids treated the place like a playground. It started with some playing in their rows but grew fast. Soon they were jumping over seats, running through rows, and racing in the aisles. I kept looking between the movie and the chaos, wondering why no staff checked on the noise. It was hard to focus on the movie. Then the real trouble started. One kid kicked another in the mouth, which started a fight between their parents. The parent of the kicked child yelled that the other wild child had attacked their baby and threatened to have them thrown out. The other parent said the kicked child was standing where he shouldn't be and should learn to stay in his seat. The first parent threatened lawsuits over possible lost teeth. The second parent challenged them, saying witnesses saw the other kid start it. The kicked child got Candy to calm down, but by then, it was too late. This seemed to give all the entitled parents permission to criticize others while defending their own kids. During this, a kid threw popcorn in the air and shouted about snow. Other children copied him. Soon popcorn rained on everyone in the lower rows. Those of us at the top mostly avoided it, watching as kernels fell on the people below. A man behind us had enough. He stood up and said this was a movie theater, not a playground, and told parents to control their kids or leave. This made things worse. The entitled parents united against him. A mother told him they paid good money and to be quiet during the film. A father said children were just expressing themselves and that kids will be kids. The man said they were ruining the movie. Another mother told him to leave if he didn't like it since it was a children's movie. The man gave up and went back to his seat. My mother and I sat quietly trying to watch the movie playing behind all this drama. By luck, the children settled down during the action scenes near the end. But we'd missed most of the plot by then. When it ended, my mom and I left quickly. I saw some responsible parents who had kept their children seated and quiet, going to talk to management. I never went back to that theater. I can't watch Finding Dory without thinking of popcorn showers, screaming, and chaos in that suburban movie theater. I wonder if those parents ever realized they did anything wrong. But people like that never think they're the problem. I work from home as a software developer. I moved into this condo building about a year ago with my roommate who works as a nurse with crazy shifts. We chose this place because it seemed perfect. Good location, decent price, nice amenities. The real estate agent forgot to mention how paper-thin the walls are. Our building has strict rules about noise, no vacuuming after 7:30 p.m., No loud parties without notice to neighbors, and no loud music that disturbs others. Most residents follow these rules, except for our neighbor, the drummer. This guy moved in about 3 months after us, and it's been a nightmare. He plays his drums at ridiculous hours, sometimes starting at 11 p.m. when people are trying to sleep. My roommate has gone to work sleep deprived many times because of his late night jam sessions. That's not all. He lets his dog pee in the elevator and doesn't clean it up. I've stepped in puddles twice. He takes up 2 parking spaces, throws cigarette butts off his balcony, and has fights with his girlfriend at 3 a.m. We've tried everything. My roommate and I have left at least 8 notes at his door. I've knocked and tried to talk to him 3 times. Other neighbors have complained to building management. Nothing works. Last weekend was the final straw. We got a letter in our mailbox from him that read, "To my neighbors on the 7th floor, I will be recording music this weekend between 10 a.m., 10 p.m. both Saturday and Sunday. I appreciate your understanding. No apology for past disturbances, no asking if this would bother anyone. Just telling us he would make noise for 24 hours over the weekend like it was his right." I was furious. When I showed the letter to my roommate, I told her I couldn't believe the drummer would send such a note after all the complaints. My roommate said it was ridiculous, especially since it was Super Bowl Sunday weekend, and she had planned to invite friends over. That's when we decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. Super Bowl Sunday was the perfect opportunity. We set up our largest speaker against the wall we share with the drummer. We turned the volume up to maximum, with the bass cranked high. Then we left for a Super Bowl party, leaving the TV blasting for about 5 hours. We put the speaker so only his unit would get the noise, not our other neighbors. It was targeted revenge. When we returned home around 9 p.m., he was waiting in the hallway, fuming. He asked us what that noise was about, saying we had ruined his recording session. I said we were just watching the Super Bowl. The drummer didn't believe it. He said we left the same play on repeat for 5 hours with nobody home and asked if we thought he was stupid. My roommate told him we were just letting him know we'd be watching TV today, copying the tone from his letter. This made him angrier. He said our actions were unacceptable, that he had clients coming over, and that we had cost him money. I said it was unfortunate and suggested that next time he should think about his neighbors before sending notes about his drum sessions. He walked off, slamming his door so hard the hallway light shook. We thought it was over, but he decided to escalate. Around 11 p.m., when my roommate was getting ready for her early shift, the walls started vibrating. He had turned his music to concert levels. The bass was so loud our dishes were rattling. I asked my roommate if he was serious, and she said this guy never learns. But we didn't get mad. We smiled because we knew something he didn't. According to building management, he was 1 complaint away from a big fine after many violations. We called the building's emergency line, and 2 other neighbors did too. The property manager came up with security. We heard the talk through the walls. The property manager told the drummer this was his final warning and that the noise was unacceptable after quiet hours. The music stopped, but the damage was done. The next day, we saw him arguing with the property manager in the lobby, waving papers and looking desperate. The fine for repeated noise violations in our building is $6,500, about 3 months of rent. He got that fine plus a warning that more violations would mean eviction. The drummer has been quiet for the past 2 weeks. No late-night jam sessions, no loud music. I even saw him picking up after his dog in the elevator yesterday. People only learn when it hits them in the wallet. When they say, when it rains, it pours, they're not kidding. I never expected to be at the center of a workplace drama, but here I am. It all started back in December when a heavy frost damaged our roof. Water started seeping through the ceiling and running down our walls. My husband, who works in construction, knew this was serious. He took time off work to fix it, but what was supposed to be a quick repair turned into a much bigger project. Once he removed the tiles and felt, he decided to build dormers to prevent having to strip the roof again in the future. Smart in theory, but it meant our roof was exposed for weeks while he worked on it. Meanwhile, I had our 9-month-old daughter to care for. Normally, my husband helps with childcare when I'm at work, But with him busy trying to keep our house from being destroyed by water damage, I was on my own. My family lives several hours away, so they couldn't help either. And on my salary working at a children's museum, there was no way I could afford nursery care. I've been at the museum for 3 years now. I love my job, creating interactive exhibits for children, designing sensory experiences, and watching kids learn through play. The museum isn't huge, but we have a dedicated team that works well together. Or at least we did until recently. When the roof situation happened, I went to my direct supervisor to explain. I explained to my supervisor that I was in a really tough spot. I told her my husband needed to fix our roof, which meant he couldn't watch our daughter while I was at work. I made it clear that I didn't have any childcare options right now. My supervisor said it sounded stressful, but then suggested it might actually work out okay. She reminded me about the new baby sensory room planned for February half term, and thought having a baby around while I designed it could be perfect. She told me to bring my daughter in and assured me it would be fine. I was so relieved. For all of January, I brought my daughter to work. She was content to play in her travel cot or sit in her carrier while I worked. Sometimes my co-workers would take turns holding her when I needed to use both hands. It was challenging, but I made it work. During this time, I created a massive audiobook trail and designed a beautiful baby sensory room. I poured my heart into it, staying late after putting my daughter to bed to finish preparations. I even completed the installation a week early, which everyone on site was thrilled about. One of my co-workers exclaimed that the sensory room was amazing and specifically praised the live projections with the ocean theme as being perfect. Another co-worker added that the audiobook trail was really clever and predicted that the kids were going to love it. My supervisor told me I had outdone myself, especially considering everything I was dealing with at home. I was feeling proud of what I'd accomplished despite the difficult circumstances. The exhibition was set to launch during February half term, and I was scheduled to be on site for 5 full days to monitor the opening week. Everything was ready to go. Then, the day before I was supposed to start, I received an email that made my blood boil. It was from the CEO, someone who rarely even sets foot in the museum. The email read, "It has come to my attention that you've been bringing your infant to work. This is inappropriate and must stop immediately. Please make alternative arrangements for childcare before returning to work." I stared at the screen in disbelief. After weeks of bringing my daughter with the full knowledge and approval of my direct supervisor, after completing an entire exhibition early and to everyone's satisfaction, this was the response I got from someone who hadn't even seen how I was managing. I replied that I understood. I explained that, unfortunately, as previously discussed with my supervisor, I had no alternative childcare options at that time. I ended my email wishing them good luck finding someone to cover my shifts during the launch week. Then I immediately put in for all my accrued paid leave. The next day my phone blew up with messages. My supervisor messaged me asking what happened and why I wasn't coming in. I explained that the CEO said I couldn't bring my daughter anymore and I had no other options. My supervisor responded that this was ridiculous, especially since the exhibition was opening the next day. My co-workers were equally outraged. One co-worker sarcastically questioned how I couldn't bring a baby into a baby sensory room, saying it made no sense. Another co-worker worried about who was going to run the exhibition, pointing out that none of them knew how all the audio elements worked. What happened next made me smile. My team decided to play hardball. My supervisor told the CEO directly that if they didn't want a baby in the baby room, it simply wasn't going to get staffed. She explained that none of them knew how to operate the systems I had designed. The CEO tried to backpedal. He said he didn't mean immediately and suggested that perhaps they could work something out temporarily. I declined his offer, stating that I was using my paid leave and looking for freelance workshop opportunities elsewhere. The timing couldn't have been worse for them. Just last week, 5 staff members had quit due to poor management. That's almost half our small team. Now they were scrambling to find someone who could operate the technical aspects of my exhibition with no training. I heard from my supervisor that the launch was a mess. The audio wasn't working properly, the lighting sequences in the sensory room were out of sync, and there was no one to fix the issues as they arose. Yesterday, I received another email, this time from both the CEO and the board chair, asking if I would reconsider my position in offering a temporary childcare stipend. I haven't replied yet. Part of me is tempted to go back just for the satisfaction of watching them squirm, but I've already lined up 2 freelance workshops that pay better and allow me to bring my daughter. My husband is making progress on the roof, and I'm making progress on finding work that values me.